The morning sun filtered through the grand windows of the Morrison family estate, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Catherine Morrison stood in the doorway of the study, her hands trembling as she clutched a letter that would change everything. The elegant woman who had once commanded respect in every room now looked fragile, her usually perfect appearance disheveled from a sleepless night. William Morrison, her husband of 23 years, sat behind his mahogany desk reviewing business documents. His salt-and-pepper hair was immaculately styled as always, but the lines around his eyes had deepened over recent months. The pharmaceutical empire he had built from nothing demanded constant attention, leaving little time for family matters that increasingly seemed to spiral beyond his control. Catherine's voice, barely above a whisper, broke the morning silence. "William, we need to talk." The letter in her hand contained results from a private investigator she had hired 3 weeks ago. What she discovered about her husband's business dealings and personal life would shatter the foundation of their marriage and tear their family apart. The investigation had revealed that William's recent late nights at the office were not entirely devoted to business. His secretary, Victoria Sterling, a calculating woman 15 years younger than Catherine, had been manipulating situations to get closer to William. Victoria had systematically isolated William from his family, feeding him lies about Catherine's supposed interference in his business and creating situations where she appeared indispensable. William looked up from his papers, noticing the distress in his wife's eyes. "Catherine, whatever it is, it can wait. I have a board meeting in an hour, and the Henderson merger requires my immediate attention." His dismissive tone stung Catherine deeply. She remembered when he used to stop everything just to listen to her thoughts about their garden or their children's achievements. "This cannot wait, William. Our marriage cannot wait any longer." Catherine's voice grew stronger as she stepped into the room. The morning light illuminated the tears gathering in her eyes, but her resolve remained firm. She placed the investigator's report on his desk, the photographs and documents spreading across his carefully organized workspace. William's expression changed as he recognized what lay before him. Bank statements showing mysterious transfers, photographs of intimate dinners, hotel receipts, and phone records that painted a clear picture of betrayal. His face paled as he realized the extent of what Catherine had discovered. "How long have you known?" he asked quietly, his business facade crumbling to reveal the guilt he had been carrying. The weight of his choices suddenly felt crushing as he saw the pain in his wife's eyes. Victoria had convinced him that Catherine no longer cared about their relationship, but seeing her distress made him realize how wrong he had been. Catherine sat down across from him, her composure barely maintained. "I suspected something was wrong 6 months ago when you stopped coming to Emily's piano recitals and missed James's graduation ceremony. You used to never miss those moments." She paused, gathering strength for what came next. "But I hired the investigator 3 weeks ago when I found Victoria's earring in your car." The silence that followed was deafening. 23 years of marriage, 2 children, and a life built together seemed to hang in the balance. William reached across the desk toward Catherine's hand, but she pulled away. The gesture was small but spoke volumes about the distance that had grown between them. "Catherine, I can explain everything. Victoria has been going through a difficult time, and I was just trying to help her. The dinners were business-related, and the hotel receipts are from client meetings." William's explanation sounded hollow even to his own ears. He knew that his attempts to justify his actions were weak, but desperation made him try anyway. Catherine shook her head slowly, her tears finally spilling over. "William, I have been your wife for over 2 decades. I know you better than anyone, and I know when you are lying to me." She stood up, smoothing her dress with shaking hands. "Victoria has been calling our home at all hours, sending you personal messages and scheduling unnecessary meetings that keep you away from your family." The truth hung heavy in the air between them. William's shoulders sagged as he realized there was no way to minimize what had happened. His emotional affair with Victoria had poisoned his relationship with Catherine and threatened everything he had worked to build, both professionally and personally. "What do you want from me, Catherine? What do you need me to do to fix this?" William's voice carried a desperation that Catherine had never heard before. For the first time in months, he seemed to be truly present in the conversation. Not distracted by business calls or thinking about his next meeting, Catherine looked at her husband, seeing glimpses of the man she had fallen in love with decades ago, but also recognizing how much damage had been done. "I want you to choose, William. Choose your family or choose whatever this is with Victoria, but I will not continue to compete for my own husband's attention in my own home." Catherine Morrison sat in her car outside their children's school, waiting for Emily to finish her violin lesson. The afternoon sun streamed through the windshield, but she felt cold despite the warmth. Her phone had been buzzing with messages from William all day, each one more desperate than the last, begging her to come home so they could talk properly about their situation. Emily emerged from the school building, her violin case in one hand and her backpack slung over her shoulder. At 16, she possessed Catherine's graceful features and William's determined spirit, but lately she had been withdrawn and moody. Children always sensed when their parents' marriage was struggling, even when adults tried to hide the problems. "Mom, you look terrible," Emily said as she slid into the passenger seat. Her directness was startling, but Catherine appreciated her daughter's honesty. Emily had inherited William's ability to cut through pretense and speak truth, even when it was uncomfortable. "I have been having some difficulties lately, sweetheart," Catherine replied, starting the car but not immediately pulling away from the curb. She wondered how much she should tell Emily about what was happening between her and William. Their daughter was intelligent and observant, probably already aware that something serious was wrong. Emily studied her mother's profile carefully. "Is it because of Dad's secretary? I heard you crying on the phone with Aunt Margaret last week, and you mentioned someone named Victoria." The teenager's voice carried a maturity beyond her years, and Catherine realized that Emily had been piecing together the situation on her own. Catherine's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She had tried so hard to protect her children from the adult problems in their household, but Emily's perceptiveness made it impossible to maintain the pretense that everything was normal. Their family was falling apart, and Emily deserved some explanation for the tension that had been building for months. "Your father and I are going through a difficult time in our marriage," Catherine said carefully. "Sometimes adults make choices that hurt the people they love, even when they do not mean to cause harm." She wanted to be honest without turning Emily against her father or burdening her with details that were inappropriate for a teenager to handle. Emily nodded slowly, processing this information. "James thinks you and Dad are going to get divorced. He has been really upset about it, but he will not talk to anyone." At 18, James had always been the more emotional of their two children, and Catherine worried about how this crisis was affecting him during his first year of college. The mention of James made Catherine's heart ache. She had been so focused on her pain and William's betrayal that she had not fully considered how their marital problems were impacting their children's emotional well-being. Both Emily and James needed stability and reassurance, but she was struggling to provide either while dealing with her own heartbreak. "Emily, I want you to know that whatever happens between your father and me, we both love you and James completely," Catherine said, turning to face her daughter directly. "Our problems have nothing to do with you children, and we will always be your parents regardless of what changes in our relationship." Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she tried to maintain her composure. "I just want our family to be normal again. I want Dad to come to my recitals and for us to have dinner together without everyone being angry or sad." The longing in her voice broke Catherine's heart, because she wanted the same things but was not sure they were possible anymore. Meanwhile, across town, James Morrison was packing his belongings in his college dormitory room, having made the decision to come home despite his parents' insistence that he focus on his studies. At 18, he was tall like his father, but had his mother's sensitive nature, and the stress of his parents' marriage crisis was affecting his academic performance and social relationships. His roommate, David, watched with concern as James stuffed clothes into a duffel bag with angry, jerky movements. "James, maybe you should call your parents before you just show up at home. They might not want you getting involved in whatever is happening between them." My family is falling apart, and I'm supposed to sit here pretending to care about economics homework? James's voice was sharp with frustration and pain. He had always been close to both his parents, but the recent tension had made him feel like a stranger in his own family. Phone calls home had become awkward and stilted, with both parents trying to sound normal while clearly dealing with serious problems. James had inherited his father's protective instincts and his mother's emotional intelligence, making him acutely aware of the undercurrents in his family relationships. He could hear the strain in his mother's voice during their weekly phone calls, and noticed how his father seemed distracted and guilty during their brief conversations. "I need to be there for my mom and Emily," James continued, zipping his bag with determination. "My dad has been acting strange for months, and my mom has been trying to hold everything together by herself. Emily should not have to deal with this alone while I am sitting in a college dormitory pretending everything is fine." David respected James's loyalty to his family, but he worried about his friend's tendency to take responsibility for problems that were beyond his control. "James, your parents are adults, and whatever is happening between them is their issue to resolve. You cannot fix their marriage, and trying to do so might just make everything more complicated." James paused in his packing, considering David's words, but his need to protect his family was stronger than his logical understanding of boundaries. "Maybe I cannot fix their marriage, but I can make sure my mom and sister know they are not alone. My family needs me right now, and I'm not going to abandon them when things get difficult." The drive home would take 4 hours, giving James time to think about what he would say when he arrived. He hoped to find a way to help his parents remember what they had built together and why their family was worth fighting for, but he had no idea how deep the damage went or whether repair was even possible. The boardroom fell silent as William Morrison entered, his usual confident stride replaced by hesitant steps. The Henderson merger meeting that had seemed so important an hour ago now felt insignificant compared to the conversation he had just had with Catherine. Victoria Sterling sat at the far end of the polished conference table, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the overhead lights as she organized presentation materials with calculated precision. Victoria had been expecting this moment for weeks. She had carefully orchestrated situations to drive a wedge between William and Catherine, knowing that eventually the marriage would crack under pressure. Her plan was methodical and patient, built on understanding exactly what William needed to hear during his moments of doubt and frustration with his family life. As William took his seat, Victoria caught his eye and smiled warmly, the same smile that had initially seemed so supportive during long work nights. She had positioned herself as the understanding confidant who listened without judgment, the professional woman who shared his business ambitions, and the companion who made him feel younger and more appreciated than he felt at home. "William, you seem distracted today. Is everything all right?" Victoria's voice carried just the right amount of concern, but William could now hear the manipulation that Catherine had tried to warn him about. The caring tone felt hollow when he compared it to the genuine pain he had seen in his wife's eyes earlier that morning. The other board members shuffled through their documents, unaware of the personal drama unfolding before them. William tried to focus on the merger details, but his mind kept returning to Catherine's ultimatum. "Choose your family or choose whatever this is with Victoria." The words echoed in his head as he watched Victoria present her analysis with professional competence. During a break in the meeting, Victoria approached William near the coffee station. Her hand touched his arm gently, a gesture that had once provided comfort but now felt invasive. "William, I can see something is bothering you. You can talk to me about anything." William stepped back slightly, creating physical distance between them for the first time in months. "Victoria, I think we need to discuss our working relationship and establish some clearer boundaries." His words were careful and measured, but Victoria's sharp intelligence immediately recognized the shift in his demeanor. "Boundaries?" Victoria's perfectly composed expression flickered with surprise and something darker. She had invested months in cultivating their relationship, positioning herself as indispensable to both William's professional success and emotional well-being. The possibility that he might choose his family over her had not been part of her calculations. My wife is concerned about the amount of time we spend together outside of normal business hours. She feels that some of our interactions have been inappropriate for a married man. William spoke quietly, aware that other colleagues were nearby. But Victoria's reaction was immediate and dramatic. Catherine is jealous of your success and resents anyone who appreciates your intelligence and business acumen, Victoria said, her voice taking on an edge that William had never heard before. She has never understood the pressure you face running this company. And now she is trying to sabotage your professional relationships because she cannot handle your achievements. William was taken aback by the venom in Victoria's response. For months, she had been subtly reinforcing the idea that Catherine did not appreciate him. But hearing it stated so bluntly made him realize how Victoria had been poisoning his perception of his own wife. Catherine had always been supportive of his career, even when it meant sacrificing her own ambitions to raise their children and manage their home. Victoria. Catherine has supported my career for over 20 years. She gave up her own profession to help build what we have together. William's defense of his wife surprised them both. For the first time in months, he was seeing his marriage clearly. Without Victoria's constant negative commentary clouding his judgment, Victoria's mask slipped further as she realized her influence over William was slipping away. William, you're making a mistake. Catherine represents your past, but I represent your future. Together, we could build something much greater than what you have now. The boldness of Victoria's statement shocked William. She was not just talking about a professional partnership anymore, and her intentions were becoming crystal clear. She had been planning to replace Catherine in his life, using her position at the company to gradually take over both his professional and personal world. Victoria. I think it would be best if you requested a transfer to another department or considered other employment opportunities, William said firmly. Our working relationship has become complicated in ways that are not appropriate for either of us. Victoria's composure cracked completely and her true nature emerged. You cannot dismiss me, William. I know too much about your business dealings, about the shortcuts you have taken, about the questionable decisions that built this empire. Her threat was clear and calculated, revealing that she had been collecting information that could be used against him. William felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the extent of Victoria's manipulation. She had not only been trying to destroy his marriage, but she had also been positioning herself to have leverage over his business. The woman he had trusted with confidential information had been building a case to control him completely. The conference room door opened, and other board members began returning from their break. Victoria quickly composed herself, but William had seen enough to understand the dangerous game she had been playing. He now faced not only repairing his marriage but also protecting his company from someone who had been systematically gathering ammunition to use against him. The Morrison family home felt like a battlefield when James arrived unexpectedly that evening. Catherine was in the kitchen preparing dinner with mechanical precision, her movements sharp and controlled, while William paced in his study making. Heated phone calls about Victoria's sudden resignation and her implied threats about confidential company information. Emily looked up from her homework when she heard James's car in the driveway, relief flooding her face as her older brother walked through the front door. James, I am so glad you are here, she said, rushing to hug him tightly. The tension in her shoulders told him everything he needed to know about how difficult things had become since his last visit home. I could not stay at school knowing you were dealing with this alone, James said, holding his sister close. At 18, he was protective by nature, and seeing Emily's distress made his decision to come home feel absolutely right regardless of what his parents might say about interrupting his education. Catherine appeared in the doorway between the kitchen and living room, her face showing a mixture of surprise and concern when she saw James. Sweetheart, you should be at college. Your education is too important to interrupt because of problems between your father and me. Despite her words, the relief in her voice was evident. Having James home felt like gaining an ally during the most difficult period of her life. Mom, my family is more important than any class or assignment, James replied firmly. He could see the exhaustion in his mother's eyes and the way she was trying to maintain normalcy while her world crumbled around her. Besides, I could not concentrate on anything knowing that you and Emily were going through this crisis without support. William emerged from his study, his phone call finished but his expression grim. Seeing James standing in their living room with his duffel bag made William realize how serious their family crisis had become. His son's presence was both a comfort and a reminder of how much his choices had put at risk. James, you should not have driven 4 hours in the dark. The roads can be dangerous, and you have classes tomorrow, William said, though his tone lacked conviction. Having his son home during this difficult time felt like a blessing, even though he knew James should be focusing on his education rather than his parents' marital problems. Dad, I am 18 years old and perfectly capable of driving myself. Home when my family needs me, James responded with the quiet confidence that reminded both parents of William's own determination at that age. Besides, I called my professors and arranged to make up any work I miss. My family comes first. The four of them stood in the living room, the elephant in the room growing larger by the moment. Emily looked between her parents and her brother, hoping that James's presence might somehow restore the family dynamic that had been missing for months. Catherine and William exchanged glances, both realizing that their children deserved an explanation for the turmoil that had been affecting their entire household. Children, your mother and I need to have a serious conversation with both of you, William said, gesturing toward the family room where they had shared so many happy moments over the years. The irony was not lost on any of them that they were about to discuss the potential dissolution of their family in the same room where they had celebrated birthdays, holidays, and achievements. Catherine sat on the sofa with Emily beside her, while James chose the chair across from his parents, unconsciously positioning himself where he could see everyone's faces clearly. William remained standing, his business training making him more comfortable addressing situations from a position of authority, even when discussing personal family matters. Your father has become involved with someone from his office, Catherine began, her voice steady despite the pain behind her words. This relationship has damaged our marriage and created problems that we are trying to figure out how to resolve. She wanted to be honest with her children without sharing inappropriate details or turning them against their father. James's jaw tightened as he processed this information. He had suspected something like this based on the changes he had observed in his father's behavior and his mother's increasing sadness, but hearing it confirmed made his protective instincts surge. Emily reached for her mother's hand, offering comfort even as she struggled with her own emotions. Dad, how could you do this to Mom, to our family? James's voice carried disappointment and anger that cut through William's heart. His son's respect had always meant everything to him, and seeing that respect crumbling was almost worse than losing Catherine's trust. William sat down heavily in his chair, the weight of his choices pressing down on him. James, I made terrible mistakes, and I have hurt everyone I love most in this world. There is no excuse for what I have done, and I'm trying to figure out how to repair the damage I have caused. Are you going to get divorced? Emily asked quietly, the question that had been haunting both children for weeks. Her voice was small and scared, reminding everyone that despite her maturity, she was still a 16-year-old girl who needed her family to be stable and secure. Catherine and William looked at each other across the room, both recognizing that their answer would affect their children's sense of security for years to come. Catherine had given William an ultimatum that morning, but seeing their family together made the complexity of their situation even more apparent. We are working through some very serious problems, Catherine replied carefully. Your father has ended his inappropriate relationship, but rebuilding trust and repairing our marriage will take time and effort from both of us. We cannot make promises about the outcome, but we want you both to know that we are committed to being good parents regardless of what happens between us. James stood up abruptly, his emotions overwhelming his usual composure. I cannot sit here and listen to this family fall apart. We are supposed to be stronger than this. We are supposed to stick together when things get difficult. His voice broke slightly as he struggled with the helplessness of watching his parents' marriage crumble despite his desire to fix everything. 2 weeks had passed since James's emotional outburst in the family room, and the Morrison household had settled into an uncomfortable routine of careful politeness and avoided conversations. William had been sleeping in the guest room while Catherine tried to process whether their marriage could survive the betrayal and manipulation she had discovered. Victoria's departure from the company had created additional complications that William was still trying to resolve. She had taken copies of sensitive documents and was threatening to expose confidential business information unless she received a substantial severance package. The woman who had once seemed supportive and understanding had revealed herself to be calculating and dangerous. Catherine spent her mornings in the garden, finding solace in the physical work of pruning roses and planting spring flowers. The garden had always been her sanctuary, a place where she could think clearly and find peace. James often joined her, working silently beside his mother while they both processed the changes happening in their family. "Mom, I've been thinking about what Dad said about making mistakes," James said one morning as they worked together weeding the flower beds. "I know what he did was wrong, but I also remember how happy you two used to be together. Is there any chance you might be able to forgive him?" Catherine paused in her work, considering her son's question carefully. James had inherited his father's analytical mind and his mother's emotional depth, making him particularly skilled at seeing situations from multiple perspectives. His question was not naive, but rather reflected genuine concern for the family's future. "James, forgiveness is not the same thing as trust," Catherine replied thoughtfully. "I can forgive your father for his mistakes, but rebuilding the trust that makes a marriage work is much more complicated. Trust takes years to build and can be destroyed in moments." Inside the house, William was reviewing legal documents related to Victoria's threats and trying to minimize the damage she could cause to the company. His lawyer had advised him that Victoria's actions could constitute blackmail, but pursuing legal action might create more publicity than the situation warranted. Emily knocked on his study door, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing an expression that reminded William of Catherine when she was determined to have a difficult conversation. "Dad, we need to talk," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk with the same directness that had characterized her approach to problems since childhood. "Emily, I know you are upset about what is happening between your mother and me," William began, but Emily held up her hand to stop him. Her maturity in handling this family crisis had surprised everyone, and William realized that his 16-year-old daughter had insights that he needed to hear. "Dad, I do not want to hear apologies or explanations right now," Emily said firmly. "I want to know what you are doing to fix this. Mom has been crying when she thinks nobody is watching, and James is so angry that he can barely look at you. Our family is falling apart, and I need to know if you are fighting to save it." William was struck by his daughter's directness and the pain in her voice. Emily had always been the peacemaker in their family, the one who smoothed over conflicts and brought people together. Seeing her taking on the role of family therapist at 16 made him realize how much his actions had forced his children to grow up too quickly. "Emily, I am trying to repair the damage I have caused, but I am not sure your mother will be able to forgive me," William admitted. "I betrayed her trust in ways that cannot be easily fixed, and I understand if she decides that our marriage cannot survive what I have done." Emily leaned forward in her chair, her expression intense. "Dad, do you love Mom? Not the woman from your office, but Mom. Do you still love her the way you used to?" Her question cut to the heart of the matter with the clarity that only a child could bring to an adult situation. William felt tears gathering in his eyes as he considered Emily's question. "I love your mother more than I can explain. Emily, I made terrible choices because I was feeling overwhelmed and unappreciated, but I never stopped loving her. Victoria made me feel important and understood during a difficult time, but she was not trying to help me. She was trying to replace your mother in my life." "Then you need to fight for our family," Emily said with conviction. "You need to show Mom that you choose her over everything else, including your pride and your business problems. You need to prove that we are worth more to you than whatever made you think that woman was a good idea." Meanwhile, Catherine was having her own revelatory conversation with James as they worked in the garden. Her son's perspective on the situation had been evolving as he watched both his parents struggle with the aftermath of William's betrayal. "Mom, I know Dad hurt you terribly, but I have been watching him these past 2 weeks," James said carefully. "He looks like he has lost everything that mattered to him. I think he finally understands what his choices cost our family." Catherine looked at her son, seeing William's intelligence and determination combined with the compassion that came from her own influence. "James, I appreciate that you want to help fix this situation. But some things cannot be repaired simply because we want them to be better." "I know that, Mom. But I also know that you and Dad built something special together before that woman started interfering," James replied. "Maybe it is possible to build something new that is even stronger because you both understand now what you could lose." That evening, William found Catherine sitting on the back porch watching the sunset, something she had done alone for the past 2 weeks. He approached carefully, carrying 2 glasses of wine and hoping she would not ask him to leave. "Catherine, may I sit with you?" he asked quietly. She nodded without looking at him, but her willingness to share the space felt like a small step forward. They sat in silence for several minutes, both lost in their own thoughts about the future of their relationship and their family.